Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've got Alan Saunders on today. I want to talk about the potential of Aaron Rodgers following the path of other older quarterbacks who were former Super Bowl champions that went to new teams and had success. Can he be like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady when they went to their new teams? We'll talk about that and answer more of your questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. More on them later. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Alan Saunders. He's back from SteelersNow.com. Alan, we're going to get into some Aaron Rodgers legacy talk here in a little bit in comparison to things. But I always think it's interesting when we're talking about quarterbacks and legacies and GOAT conversations. And Aaron Rodgers is in a particularly unique spot because he's been a guy who's been in that conversation for like the greatest passer of his generation, but he only has one Super Bowl to his name. And when you talk about greatest passers of the past two generations, Brady and Mahomes, they each got 3 or 6. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to look at when everything's said and done about Aaron Rodgers. Is did he do enough for the title, and what kind of a quarterback was he really when he was racking up all his stats?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think there's two different conversations there. I mean, I think team success is a lot on the quarterback, but also, like, if you ask me who I think the best passer was of like the 1990s, I'd tell you it was Dan Marino, and he didn't win a single Super Bowl. So, I mean, I think it's kind of two separate conversations. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to contend with Brady or even some of his other contemporaries, Ben Roethlisberger, in terms of team success. But I think when you look at his passing skill and it's just pure like arm talent, I don't know that there's anybody over the last 20 years I'd rather have.
Interesting. Well, that leads
prime.
us.
Obviously,
it is prime. Yeah, not right now. Yeah. But there was an interesting question we got in our Locked On Steelers call-in line. By the way, if you ever have a question, call in at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. And it got me thinking about this because Aaron Rodgers, like a lot of successful quarterbacks, has had to go to a new team towards the end of his career looking for greener pastures. And this question I thought was a pretty good one. Take it away, Doc from Caliente, Nevada.
Hey, Chris, this is Doc from Caliente, Nevada. I hope you're doing great. Thank you for your show. I was just thinking about the Aaron Rodgers signing, and I can go back in my mind to seeing Peyton Manning go to the Broncos, or when we saw Brady go to the Bucs, and it was like bringing a chess master to the team. I wonder if we have enough ingredients, if this is a pattern, one possible pathway to a championship. Do we have enough pieces in place around? What were the pieces that the Bucs had? What were the pieces that the Broncos had that helped them win the championship? And I'm wondering if we have enough pieces. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Doc. Appreciate you calling in with a question. As always, you can call in like he did, 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. Alan, let's save the team part for the next segment. I want to talk about the quarterbacks, where they were and and where Aaron Rodgers is. When you go and you look at Tom Brady when he went to the Buccaneers, he was turning 43 that season, coming off a pretty decent year that he had with the Patriots, where he threw 24 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. He jumped up to 40 touchdowns and 12 interceptions at 43 years old in 2020, and then in 2021 led the NFL with 5,300 passing yards, 43 touchdowns. And also only had 12 interceptions with that. He went kind of ballistic. Peyton Manning also had a different kind of way that he transitioned out of the Colts, because remember his last year he was he did pretty well for the Colts, but then he had that neck injury, didn't play in 2011, then was sent to the Broncos, but then led the NFL in completions percentage in 2012. Got, made them instantly a contender at 36 years old. Then it's 37, led the NFL in passing touchdowns with 55, only 10 interceptions. Also led the NFL in passing yards with 5,477 yards. But it wasn't until he was 39 years old that the Broncos won the Super Bowl, when he only started 9 games because his injuries caught up with him. So different trajectories with how they got there. But where do you think Aaron Rodgers compares, and where his career compared to those two guys, using Doc's example?
I don't know. It's tough. I think it's going to be hard to compare anyone to Brady. No one's ever had the sort of success he had at the ages that he had it. I mean, Manning, even that last year when he wasn't very good and they won, and he didn't play the whole season and they won the Super Bowl, he was 39. Rodgers is going to be 42 this year. Like, it's really hard. I think Brady has been better at the same age as Rodgers as they've aged. Like, Aaron Rodgers obviously did not have a great year last year, was hurt the year before. But like, when was the last time? Like, so 2020, like the 2022 season, I think that's like the real fly in the ointment. If you're thinking that like you're getting a Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, like late career resurgence out of Aaron Rodgers, is that he wasn't that good his last year in Green Bay.
Right.
Then he gets hurt. Then he goes to the Jets. You can sort of excuse the Jets for just being a disaster. But to me, that last year in Green Bay just being okay, I don't know how you think you're going to get 38-year-old Aaron Rodgers again at 42 now, 3 years removed. I don't see how that's a reasonable expectation.
And to be clear, that 38-year-old Aaron Rodgers you were talking about led the NFL with touchdown interceptions. 7% of his passes were touchdowns. Led the NFL with the best interception percentage. 0.8% of his passes were interceptions. Also led the NFL in passer rating and quarterback rating, and net yards, air net yards per attempt. Like, efficiency was the name of his game, and I thought that was a huge part of what made him who he was back then. But you're right, that's now 4 years ago. And, the Father Time's undefeated. And that doesn't mean that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a bum this year, but it does mean that he's got to answer questions about how good can he be, or how can he recapture that efficiency in an offense that he's never played in before, that hasn't been typically good. If you're thinking, well, hey, those other offenses weren't that great either when Brady or Manning stepped in on them. I kind of look back at those years, and you could say the Broncos, sure, but part of that I think was because of Tim Tebow and the situation that he was putting them in. I thought it was really funny when I went back and I looked. I was like, oh wow, the Broncos were actually had a pretty good running game. They led the league in rushing yards, were 6th in yards per attempt that last year with Tebow before they got Manning. But when you went back and you looked at the Buccaneers, and partially because Jameis Winston was just the king of throwing touchdowns and interceptions, but they had the 3rd highest points scored and 3rd highest yards as an offense, but they also finished dead last in turnovers that year. They were in a very just unique situation on offense. I think that that when we get to comparing these teams and what they are in this next segment, I think a big part of this is just how these three quarterbacks fit with their new teams, and Aaron Rodgers, of course, with a team that we're still waiting to see how they even play out.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's something to be said for his fit with the Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you just take the last year in Green Bay, and the one game in 23, and then last year with the Jets, Rodgers is averaging over a 17-game season in this sort of late phase of his career 3,688 yards, 26 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, completing 63.7% of his passes. That's not going to be an all-pro. That's probably not going to be a Pro Bowler.
Right.
But it's better than what the Steelers have been getting by a fair stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been getting to the playoffs. They've been already fairly good. I think that he can elevate them even if he is not as good as late career Peyton Manning and Tom Brady were.
I think that's a good point. Let's compare the teams, because that was the other part of Doc's question. We'll do that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us here. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Alan Saunders. Alan, revisiting Doc's question, by the way, call in like Doc did at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. We try to get you on the show. Doc bringing up a good point. Now, a big crux of his question was, how do the teams compare to where they were? And you started to get into, about Aaron Rodgers being an interesting fit for the Steelers. I mean, when you look at the Steelers the past few years, there's been times where you're like, man, they could just be a quarterback away. Now, granted, they also needed an offensive line, but not every team has everything going for them at all times that wins the Super Bowl, right? Like there's teams with glaring weaknesses. That's like the last Steelers Super Bowl team, they had a not good offensive line, and they were able to make it work because their defense was just that elite. They had a young quarterback that was a gutsy playmaker with a lot of other playmakers around him, and they were able to make things happen at the right time. And that's worked. And you look at that Broncos team that won with Peyton Manning. They weren't a perfect team. Neither was that Buccaneers team that won with Tom Brady. But right situations were able to brew for them. What do you think about the Steelers? This Steelers roster going into this season can compare or contrast positively or negatively towards those Broncos teams and Buccaneers teams that were kind of that Brady and Manning were able to inherit?
I think the Broncos situation is fairly comparable. You remember that 11 team was in the playoffs. They were 8-8. They were okay. They beat the Steelers in a game they should not have won. I mean, you can sort of envision the Steelers last year could have done that. They didn't, but they could have gone and won a game they shouldn't have won before. And I think they got crushed the following week.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they didn't stand a chance.
By Brady, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go out and get Peyton Manning. The next year, they're 13-3. Now, they don't go anywhere in the playoffs, but they're 13-3. I think you look at it's not like they got 10 new guys from 11 to 12. It was mostly just Peyton Manning. That's the impact that he had. Brady, to me, is a little bit more subtle because I guess I'll say it's a little more nuanced because that division is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't take a lot and also there was not there was not a when you look at what the Steelers face in the AFC right now, the gauntlet of
that's
Jackson,
a very good point.
Allen, Mahomes, there was no equivalent to that in Brady's NFC in 2020.
Right.
Beat Aaron Rodgers. But I mean, not the same. And so I think the combination there makes that comparison a little bit difficult in that the Steelers, if they're going to win 11 games, that's going to mean going to Cincinnati and winning, going to Baltimore. You're going to win some playoff games in the regular season to win 11 games. You can't coast to 11 games with their schedule this year. And then you're probably going to face some of those teams in the playoffs. So I think it's a little bit of a different animal when you start to compare the teams. When Brady went to Tampa Bay, Brady was every bit the equivalent of late career Aaron Rodgers, of late career Drew Brees, who was with the Saints then. Like, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC walking in the door. Rodgers is the third best quarterback in the AFC North.
Right.
Yeah, right. So, like, I think to me, that's where the team comparisons kind of start to fall apart.
I agree with you. You look back, even if you just account for the year the Broncos won the Super Bowl, right? You look at the 2015 AFC and what they had to go through. The Broncos at 12-4, and again, that was the year where Peyton Manning wasn't even the guy anymore. He was, they started Brock Osweiler some games. Your best AFC teams were a 12-4 Patriots team because they were always there, a 12-4 Bengals team led by Andy Dalton, a 9-7 Texans team, a 10-6 Steelers team, an 11-5 Chiefs team with Alex Smith. It wasn't the gauntlet that you're talking about, because on top of Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, you still got to deal with Josh Allen and by the way, Patrick Mahomes, who's been to 5 of the last 6 Super Bowls. To your point, this is also just a different circumstance around the Steelers. But if we're focusing on the Steelers part, I do agree with you that there's a comparison to the Broncos more so than the Buccaneers. When you go back and you look at that 2011 Broncos team, they ran the ball a lot the year before. They weren't the most efficient, but they were still pretty good. They averaged six. They had the 6th best yards per attempt average when you looked at how they were working. And that was with Willis McGahee as their lead running back. So, like, it wasn't like they had a superstar back. They had an offensive line that they had been building. But of course, it was their defense that kind of showed that, like, hey, that's the group that's going to be special. They had old Weapon X. Brian Dawkins was on that defense. People forget about that. That's one thing I always point out, that, like, hey, the Steelers should have beaten Tim Tebow in those playoffs, but it was that defense that kept the Steelers in check. And rookie Von Miller, who was the defensive rookie of the year and made second team All-Pro, was going ballistic that season. And he was across from Elvis Dumervil, who had 9.5 sacks, was a pretty good player, was in the comeback player of the year conversations. There were a lot of guys in that year that played very well. And to me, that's where also, by the way, you had Champ Bailey and Chris Harris Jr. On those teams at cornerback. So that was a pretty good Broncos team. But in the same respect, the Steelers could have a defense that plays at a very high level this year with Aaron Rodgers. And that's what could be really interesting to me, is that if Aaron Rodgers were to get the best defense maybe he's ever played with, because they think back to his best years with the Packers, they were more opportunistic than great defenses. Like, even the one that beat the Steelers, they led the league in turnovers, but weren't a efficient defense when it came to stopping and teams from scoring and holding them to certain yardage. But if the Steelers can be that elite defense and be the best defense Aaron Rodgers ever played with, that might be the ticket to getting him into this conversation. And again, you got to win a Super Bowl to be in this conversation, right? And I don't think that that's going to happen. I don't think you think it's going to happen either. But I do think that there's a chance for Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers to have some sort of chemistry that does get a positive result, where maybe they do become a better team. Maybe they do win a playoff game. Maybe they do get, maybe to the AFC Championship game somehow. That, to me, would be a big win of a season if they won a playoff game and if they even got to the AFC Championship. If they got to the divisional round, that's, first of all, a step up because they haven't been there in a while. But if they got to the AFC Championship game, I'd be like, hey, this is a sign that if you get the right quarterback in the draft, like, this roster is ready to go.
Yeah, and like they've been pretty unlucky when it comes to the situation. Like, they got to go to Baltimore this year. Just missed out on being able to play the Texans or the Chargers. They had to go to Buffalo last year without TJ Watt.
Yep.
Like, go to Kansas City. Like, they had some opportunities there where they could have gotten a different matchup and they probably would have won a game. So, like, I'm not necessarily saying winning a playoff game would mean this is like some great success, because they could be worse than they were in several of the last few years and still find a way to win. But worse teams have won playoff games. If they go in, somehow the Jaguars sneak into the playoffs and they happen to draw them and then beat them by 2 and then go lose to the Chiefs by 50. I'm not calling this some kind of great success. Like, but I do think, and the other thing I think about Rodgers is, and where he makes a difference compared to every other guy they've had recently, at least since Ben, I feel better about his chances of going on the road in the playoffs and engineering an upset. I just think he personally, his experience, the headiness that he plays with, he does the things that you have to do to be an underdog and win. And I don't think you could say that about their quarterbacks the last couple of years.
I agree with that. I think what's funny enough, I think a better comparison quarterback wise, not even going back to that part of the conversation, isn't Peyton Manning or Tom Brady where they were. It might be Brett Favre, his predecessor. When you look at what Brett Favre was doing at the tail end of his career in Green Bay, 28 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, wasn't putting up the huge numbers. They were 13-3 that year, but then he kind of retires, then comes back, and then he goes to the Jets. He has 22 touchdowns and 22 interceptions, looks very mid and looks like, okay, yeah, why is this old 39-year-old man doing this? Then at 40 years old, he goes to a Vikings team that's built to be competitive. They go 12-4. He throws 33 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. A pretty solid year there. But basically, I think the best of his years in maybe his last decade or so of playing was that year in Minnesota. If Aaron Rodgers could do something like that, where again went to the Jets, wasn't as good, leaves the Jets, goes to a team that, hey, you got a lot of pieces around them. They just need a guy to lift them up. That might be the thing that might be more comparable for what the Steelers get. But again, that Vikings team didn't win a Super Bowl. They got to the NFC Championship game and lost. But I do think that there is something there for Aaron Rodgers to work with this Steelers team. Again, it's going to take, as I've said for months, it's going to take this offensive line taking a step up like they're supposed to. It's going to take some of these younger second and third year players like Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton, the offensive line I talked about with Broderick Jones, Zach Frazier, Troy. It's going to take a lot of those guys stepping up and forming these new younger cores within the Steelers in these position groups. But if even two of those things happen and the Steelers are healthy and TJ Watt's back and Cam Hayward's doing his thing and they're playing well, and then Aaron Rodgers can feed off of that and work with DK Metcalf and the run game's there, then all of a sudden, I do think this team is a better version of the Steelers team than we have seen in the past few years. Now, granted, I just said a lot of ifs, so that's not saying that any of this is definitely going to happen. But I think that it's more reasonable now to expect younger players of the Steelers to step up this year than it has been for the past few years, considering most of them have either been rookies or guys that were like, yeah, I'm not so sure yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of ifs for sure, but I think there are also there is a reasonable path to enough of the answers to those ifs being yes. It's not like you're sitting there saying, "What if Will
Howard becomes the superstar?"
Right? Yeah, it's just as long as Rodgers doesn't have some sort of major deterioration in his physical skills, which I didn't see in minicamp at all, it looks good so far. As long as Broderick Jones was a highly touted first-round pick, at least becomes a above average starter. That's not a crazy expectation, right? As Arthur Smith having more success in his second year in the scheme with a quarterback that better fits what he's looking to do, and two running backs that better fit what he's looking to do. All the things that need to happen are probably not going to happen, but none of them individually are so outlandish that you should dismiss them. Right.
I think, and that's the thing here, is that's going to be the story of the 2025 Steelers. Aaron Rodgers, as much as we're focusing on him for this episode, I still maintain the goal of this year is to get those other things to happen. Because if those things happen, no matter how good Aaron Rodgers is this year, you're setting up your core to say hey, okay, rookie quarterback that we're drafted next year, you're inheriting an offensive line that's working, it's cooking, and it's young and hungry and ready to go, and they're only getting better each year. You're inheriting an offense with playmakers like Caleb Johnson, Jalen Warren, Pat Freiermuth. You're hoping Darnell Washington takes a step up, and then DK Metcalf, who you've added to the mix, and maybe a Calvin Austin or Roman Wilson, get better this year. And then you have a defense that's rocking because they've developed. That's what I think that the biggest story is. And if Aaron Rodgers can just be the sort of cake topper, on top of that, and is just hey, I'm here to just conduct things and make things go well. That I think is the Steelers' ticket to having a better season than they've had. We're gonna keep going. We got to take another quick break. When we come back, we got one more question from a Locked On Steelers listener right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders. Stick with us. We'll be right back. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, let's get to our last question here. Still staying on Aaron Rodgers. Kind of made this a Rodgers-centric show today, but this is Frank from Greenville.
Hey, Chris. This is Frank from Greenville, Pennsylvania. I'm a 42-year-old lifelong Steelers fan. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't initially looking forward to Rodgers joining the roster. But I do have to admit, he's absolutely the best option we have right now. And as closer we get to the season, the more excited I am to see how it plays out. But I've noticed a lot of hate and animosity out in the media. For example, Mike Tannenbaum saying Rodgers will be irrelevant by Thanksgiving. Some of the animosity there at the Jets. There still seems to be some with Green Bay and so on. And I'm curious, do you think Rodgers goes into the season playing with a little bit of a chip on his shoulders and, just goes out balling, trying to prove that he's not irrelevant, and despite his age, he still has significance in the league? I think it could actually play out fairly well if he goes out there with the right attitude. Curious to hear your thoughts on it.
I think it's a good question there from Frank from Greenville. Thank you, Frank, for calling in. As always, you can call in like Frank did at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep a question under a minute. Alan, your thoughts? Could Aaron Rodgers come in with a chip on his shoulder, and would that be something good for the Steelers to have in their locker room?
I don't get the sense that that's what he's motivated by. I don't get the sense that, he's sitting there scrolling through his phone, reading everything that's written about him or said about him. He seems pretty checked out of that process, to be perfectly honest. Although he isn't coming on Pat McAfee's show later today, so maybe he hears it from those guys, I'm sure, what's being said about him. But I think, look, I just think if you're his age and you're trying to do this, you got to have enough internal motivation that nothing like that's going to matter. We talked about the last 3 years. I think he has a lot of motivation to prove that that's not who he is, that he can be better than that he can be the player he was before. I think that would probably mean a whole lot more to him than shutting up Mike Tannenbaum.
See,
I do think he wants to beat the Jets in week 1, though. I will say that. I do think
he definitely does. And the Packers. I think he wants to beat those two teams specifically.
I don't feel any animosity between Aaron and Green Bay. I don't think I think he still has a lot of respect for the Packers. I think Aaron Rodgers will feel pretty good. Like, if he goes out there, beats the doors off the Jets, and then tears his Achilles again in week 2, he'll be like, all right, but I got him.
That was worth it.
Yeah. I think that's a big one.
So I hear you on that. I do think Aaron Rodgers wants to prove people wrong, but I think maybe not in the Mike Tannenbaum way, but in the way I think the chip on his shoulder is to show that I'm not this person that you've made me out to be. And part of it, I do think Aaron Rodgers very much is responsible for the own mystique that's around him, the dark retreats, the ayahuascas, and all the things that have come with it. But one thing, when I asked him about being a leader, when he came to minicamp, and that was one of my primary questions, was because Cam Hayward and Pat Frymuth mentioned that on the podcast that morning and what he could bring as a leader. He talked about being a servant leader, and he talked about he basically was like, I'm not here to steal spotlight. I'm here to fit what they're asking me to do. If Aaron Rodgers was able to play well, he doesn't have to be MVP well. He doesn't have to even be all pro well, second team all pro well. He just has to be efficient and good and make sure that this offense runs on time. And if he's able to do that while taking a step back and not having to be the center of attention all the time and being kind of just that a guy that fits in with the boys and the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin's mystique, to him, I think that's the chip on his shoulder. That's like, all y'all painted this narrative about me out there, and I'm proving you wrong. Even if there's plenty of evidence to things that he did that it's like, okay, that guy there's something going on there. That's a little off. But I think that might be the chip on his shoulder, that he wants to fit into this culture so much and to show that, hey, I'm not a me guy. I'm a good teammate. I've been a good teammate. It's not my fault what happened in New York. It was not my fault, how things were ending in Green Bay when they sent me out and they brought in Jordan Love. And again, he didn't treat Jordan Love like Brett Favre treated him. So I think that's the chip on his shoulder to answer to answer our friend Frank's question here, is that he might be trying to prove people that he's not this persona that's been that people have cast upon him. And if that's part of it, I think that could be a good thing, because then if he comes in and he's committed to just, hey, I'm here to work every day. And like when I talked to the Steelers players, they said that's what matters the most to them, is that he's here and he's all in. That's all we needed to know. And then he's one of the boys. If that happens, I think that could be a good thing, because then it's not about him. It's about what's making the team better.
Yeah. And, I think maybe the people who have like personal motivations versus team motivations, I think like you're always motivated to accomplish your personal goals. But I think if you've ever won anything in a team sport, like, you can't get to where Aaron Rodgers has been without being willing to subsume to the team concept, right? Like you can't win a Super Bowl only caring about you have to buy in, and he has. And so I understand why people think that might be an issue, but I don't think it will be.
I don't think it will be as much, but I do think it's going to be interesting to follow about how all the narratives go. But like you said, he talks on Pat McAfee tomorrow, according to Mark Bowley. So that'll be fun and interesting. We'll see how that goes and we'll talk about that maybe tomorrow on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But Alan, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you always being here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. That people can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
_PGH on social media. SteelersNow.com is where you can find my written work. My podcast, Steelers Morning Rush and Steelers Afternoon Drive, can be found on the Steelers Now YouTube page or anywhere you find podcasts.
Absolutely. He's Alan Saunders. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. As always, follow me on all your favorite social media apps, whether it's TikTok, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram. It's the same handle everywhere, at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes. We're back here tomorrow with another episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. See you here.